online. Voxcom open. Engage Sanctioned files. Welcome to the Fluffenhammer.
And hello there, my little chickadees. As a fine man once said, the attempt to make heaven on earth inevitably produces hell. And as another fine man once said, it was an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of hell there.
Indeed.
Absolutely, the torments of the damned. Playing throughout every circle of hell, certainly the lower circles.
Would you like to see Dante's Inferno, where Dante had to deal with Timmy Mallet?
Jesus God. Yeah. I think he would have given up at that point. I think he would have probably said, there's nothing more awful that I can imagine.
I shall get to the centre, to the Stygian depths. It was a nitsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot. I will not. Goodbye.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Sanctioned, by the way.
Hi, guys. Hello. Welcome to this very particular Patreon episode of the Fluffenhammer.
It is. I'm Adam, and this is George. Hello,
Hi,
George.
Hello. And we've got a bit of an interesting one for you this time round, I think. It's something that Adam and I kind of have been discussing quite a lot recently, relating to the Horus Heresy series of books, which is how much the universe of Warhammer 40,000 has changed as a result of those books, and how much core elements of the background have changed as a result of those books. Much more so, I imagine, than most people realise.
Yes, there's a lot. See, this is going to be an interesting one for me, because I'm going to be learning along with you, the listeners. In fact, a lot of you listeners are probably going to know more than I do when it comes to the Black Library Horus Heresy books and the story of the Imperium, because my knowledge of 40k it stops at around about 99-2000.
Right, so did you ever actually read Horus Rising and False Gods and whatnot?
I did. About 2 years ago.
How did it affect you? I mean, what did you think?
Well, Horus Rising was a really strange one for me.
Real surprise, yeah?
Yes, because it wasn't the Imperium that I remembered.
Not at all. It's not the Imperium that they've set up.
No.
Before, I think people have generally forgotten this, but before Horus Rising, there were very few references to the Imperium as it was in the Great Crusade. It was this deliberately vague, misty. There was hardly anything about it. All you knew was that it was a sort of golden age. Humanity was in the ascendant. Human civilization was spreading across the stars, and the Emperor was at the forefront of that with the Primarchs. That's all you really knew about it. For all players of the game and fans of the mythology knew, it wasn't much different from now.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the present day 40k. So, all the sort of religious fanaticism and whatnot that is part and parcel of the present day 40k universe and the Imperium, one would be forgiven for assuming that was also part of the Great Crusade Imperium too.
Yeah.
But what happened for me when I read Horus Rising, and I read it when it was first published, I read both it and False Gods together, was this incredible shock, which I think was very deliberate, because what they did with the Horus Heresy books was that they tried to make the setting new. They tried to invert certain elements of it, and nowhere was that more apparent than in the nature of the Imperium of 10,000 years ago. The Imperium of the Great Crusade. It's the notion of the Imperium being this secularizing force, for example, being devoted to rationality and to science above and beyond superstition and mythology, was not a thing.
No.
It just was not a concept in the background before the Horus Heresy books. And that completely inverted the entirety of the universe, and also added this wonderful layer of irony to it. This wonderful layer of irony, because of course the present day Imperium has become the total opposite of that.
It has. There's a lot of intelligence that's gone into creating the response to what the Horus Heresy would have done. It's the if the fall of Rome had led to a new version of Rome, how would that have reacted to the sociological aspects of what Rome had become, and in this case, what the Imperium had become, which now is you hold on to each and every life so tight that they can barely breathe. Whilst before that, it was a lot more pushing and expansion. And
well, there's a massive dynamic difference between the Imperium of the Great Crusade and the Imperium of now. The Imperium of now is effectively it's a failed utopia. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's a failed utopia. So the vision of its original founding and the dynamism that impelled it through the stars is gone. And in its place, you have this recession into superstition, ignorance, conservatism, oppression, to ideological extremity. Now, you could argue that the Imperium of the Great Crusade is also ideologically extreme. It is phenomenally xenophobic still.
Oh, yes.
It still operates under the auspices that humanity is somehow like the genetic supremacy, that it is somehow the ultimate life form in all of creation, and that it has some sort of divine right. That's essentially what impels the original Great Crusade, this notion that humanity has a divine right to the stars and to the lands and the worlds of all the universe, and that all of the other races and species, and even the divergent civilizations of humanity or branches of humanity that demonstrate like genetic deviance, for example, are to be eradicated. They still have that, but the dynamic is different. It's more hopeful, for one thing. If you look at the way the Great Crusade operates, it's not this dark, moribund force. It's actually this incredibly dynamic, hopeful, forward-thinking force that's looking to tomorrow. It's looking to the establishment of this grand human empire across the stars that will sustain forever.
Well, that's something you said earlier on, which I find very interesting, the failed utopia. The pre-heresy expansion that's taking place in the Imperium is one of utopia at any cost.
Well, it is it is a literal utopia. It's a utopian vision that's going on at the beginning of the Imperium, at like the early days of the Imperium.
Yeah.
And in a very real sense, people have a false notion of what utopia means in fiction, largely founded because of the likes of Star Trek and whatnot, which people tend to hold up as, ironically, as the icon of utopian fiction. Well, in a way, yeah. I mean, you have this kind of dubious socialism in Star Trek, but the problem with Star Trek as a utopia is that it removes one of the fundamental aspects that defines utopian fiction. Utopias are not, as people tend to preconceive, perfect societies.
No.
That's not it. If you go back and read the original Utopia by Thomas More, which founded the very word utopia comes from the book Utopia by Thomas More, It's not a perfect civilization. A utopia is not a perfect civilization. A utopia is a civilization that operates under constraints but makes the very, 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 very best of those limitations, yeah?
Yes.
So it acknowledges limitation, but it does its very best to elevate the status of every citizen within it to a functionable level, yeah? That's what a utopia is, okay? It is not a civilization like in Star Trek, where all want has been removed. Because what you have in Star Trek, as you get in a lot of bad utopias, is the removal of tension. You have the removal of privation. In Star Trek, it's because of replicator technology, yeah?
Yes.
So with replicator technology is one of those hideous magic wands, yeah? That basically removes all of the tensions that necessarily inform utopian fiction, yeah? Right. Utopian fiction is about the struggle to sustain. that utopia, that civilization, under its constraints, and also to maintain the status of its citizens, yeah?
Let's get into it, George, because this is a conversation that I always enjoy having. Star Trek has shot itself in the foot from the start.
With that very notion. The notion of the replicator just does it.
The moment that replicators turn up, you have lost art. You have lost the ability to create.
It's a magic wand.
Without the ability to create and without no need to work for money, because nobody gets paid in Star Trek, what you have then is a lack of need. The moment there is a lack of need, there is a lack of conflict, a lack of progress, a lack of evolution. As a result, the only good Star Trek series is the one where they went out into space and started punching aliens in the face.
Well, I think the very best stories in Star Trek are the ones that call into question the nature of its own utopianism. Yeah?
That's true. Yeah, the sector, whatever it is.
The ones that call into question the nature of the Federation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the best ones. The ones that demonstrate the hypocrisies of the Federation. Now, for me, the problem with Star Trek is not its socialism. I don't have any issue with that at all. I err more towards the socialist side of things in terms of politics. I really do. But my problem is that it can't, as a piece of fiction, it can't explore the challenges that face that socialism because the replicator removes them.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just been removed. It's a magic wand. So you don't have any of the genuine themes and struggles that you tend to find in genuine utopian fiction. Yeah? Now, for me, the Imperium, as established in the Horus Heresy books, far, far removed from what anyone was ever used to. It actually, I think people forget, it hit like a fucking asteroid. When Horus Rising first hit, it changed everything. It changed everything. Suddenly, everything was inverted. You had this political structure in the Imperium, this ideological structure that's neither one thing nor the other. It is very like Star Trek in many respects because it is kind of socialist at its core.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Everyone is provided for in the Imperium. In that Imperium, everyone is provided for. There is this status where certainly the humanity that begins on Earth and on the worlds that are incorporated into the Imperium are provided for. All resources are there, and and everyone has a place. Everyone has a function. That's the important thing as well in a utopia. In a utopia, by definition, no one is lost. Yeah.
Yes.
No one. There are no, like, say, homeless people wandering around.
There is a place for everything and everything in its place.
Everyone has a place and a function, and that's how this version of the Imperium functions, yeah? But from the very beginning, it calls into question itself. You have these wonderful moments. A lot of the early Horus Heresy books are from the perspectives of remembrancers, yeah? So normal human beings who are... They are along with the military forces of the Imperium, which are what would become the Astra Militarium, so sort of like the Imperial Navy and military, yeah? And also the Space Marine Legions, as they were back then. And the Remembrancers, their job is to record and to create art and music and photographs and to comment upon the nature of the Great Crusade. And what you get very early on is you get these remembrancer characters who witness what's actually happening in the Great Crusade and don't like it. You see, because they see it, they see the brutality, they see the incredible violence that has to be wrought in order to realize this utopian vision. So immediately you have characters that call into question the very nature of this regime, yeah? This regime that's so certain of itself, that's so dynamic, that's so forward-thinking in many, many respects, but underneath cannot be realized without pretty much what all empires have always exhibited, which is genocide, violence, oppression, and so on and so forth. It's very, very clever. One of the things the Horus Heresy books do is completely demolish this notion that the Imperium are the good guys.
Yes, because they are not. There's no way, shape, or form is humanity the good guys.
You get to see, from the perspectives of Remembrancers, what the Space Marine Legions do when they encounter even the slightest thing that they consider to be deviant from the template, from what the Emperor prescribes, yeah?
Yeah.
And it's genocide. It's just genocide. There's a story I believe you've read that you like quite a lot, which is The Last Church.
I love The Last Church so much. It was basically the catalyst for starting all of this. Because The Last Church was the first 40k story I ever read on YouTube, which then eventually led to this show existing. The Last Church is fantastic.
It's really interesting, isn't it? What you've got in The Last Church is a conversation between the last priest on Earth.
Yep.
The last one. Because they've been... The Emperor and his regime, for all of the sort of talk of enlightenment and of raising humanity from the muck, has been going around basically doing what the Nazis did.
Mm-hmm.
They've been going around rounding up all of the religious peoples, all of the superstitious peoples, and they have been killing them. They've been just getting rid of them, destroying the churches, eradicating the art, defacing everything. And the last priest on Earth in The Last Church has a sit-down conversation with the Emperor.
Before we continue, I just need to point out that I was about halfway through the book before I realised that the entire story was based around one of my favourite quotes of all time. Mm-hmm. That one being, "Man will never be free until the last king has been strangled by the entrails of the last priest."
Yeah, but this is the irony of the story, isn't it? Because
the last king is talking to the last priest.
The last king is talking to the last priest. And ironically, what happens, it's this despairing commentary upon humanity, because the Emperor is like this shining beacon of humanity, right? He's like evolution taken to the nth degree. And he is still a cunt. He is still, even with all of his scope, his perspective, his power, his intelligence, he is still like the tyrants of old.
What he does throughout that entire book, which is fascinating to me, is he plays one-upmanship.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to dazzle with his intelligence. He doesn't try to charm. He just acts like a schoolyard.
He does, and in the end,
bully.
Who's the one that resorts to force? Who's the one that resorts to burning the church down? It's him.
Yep.
You know, it's this despairing commentary upon humanity that humanity could potentially raise itself beyond superstition and religion and whatnot, which is necessary, but ultimately it will still mire itself in these ideological extremes.
Mm-hmm.
It will still be its own bane, because the base elements that inform our need for the certainties of religion and superstition are still there. They're still there in the Emperor, as ascended as he markets himself to be, and that story demonstrates it.
I think one of my favourite things about that story, one of my favourite things, there's so much in that.
That was Rufus, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you could probably hear that.
I want to enjoy it too. Is that throughout the argument, the priest is the one who makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But the Emperor is the one that you want to side with.
Yeah, it's unusual.
It's very,
isn't it?
very clever in how it does it, how everything unfolds as the story goes along.
Yeah.
You don't
it
want
is fascinating. And you see echoes of it played out later on in the Horus Heresy books when the Primarchs meet up when they descend on worlds, for example, where human civilization is not developing in the way the Imperium prescribes, yeah? Mm-hmm. And when they start having debates and discussions with the leaders of these civilizations, it's very, very quick that the Primarchs and the Space Marine legions descend into anger and violence.
Yeah.
Very, very, very quick indeed, and that is often where the seeds of the resentments come from that eventually result in the heresy.
There's I don't know if anybody else has heard it, and I know that some people are probably going to be sick of me talking about this this week. But there's a story at the moment called The Interrogation of Salvor Lamento.
Mm-hmm. Haven't read that one.
It's a very short one. It just came out in Audible last week, I think it is.
Is it a Horus Heresy book? Or
it isn't.
It's just a 140,000 one, yeah?
Who knows when it's based?
Right, okay.
It's quite a nice one. It's just it's a two heads story of two men. One is an inquisitor, the other one has been branded a traitor.
Right, okie doke.
And it's a conversation between the two of them. And as we've been talking, something's popped into my head from that, where the inquisitor starts talking about the building that they're in.
Yeah.
how the rot in the building has infused every part of it.
Yep.
There is no fixing the rot. The only way to do it is to burn it to the ground and start from scratch.
Yeah.
You cannot fix it. So instead of doing that, they are just bit by bit replacing each part of the building.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is that the rot spreads to the new part.
To the new parts, yeah, of course.
And they have to keep going back round and back round and back round. So they're putting in all of the effort and all of the time in order to keep it not at bay, but to keep it standing.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect metaphor for the post-Horus. The post-Heresy Imperium, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is another one of the big differences that Horus Rising established. Many of the Primarchs and many of the Space Marine Legions and much of humanity do not know that chaos exists.
No, they don't.
And that is it's a subtle one, but it's huge. Because in the original stuff, if you read like the Horus Heresy and the Rogue Trader books, the chaos is an established threat. In fact, part of the reason for the Great Crusade is to get rid of chaos in the original stories, Not so. From the Emperor's perspective, because he knows it exists. Bloody hell, does he know it exists. But he is engaging in this very subtle game of deceit and distraction with his sons, with the Primarchs. A lot of them don't know.
Although they didn't...
Magnus does.
Yes.
Because Magnus can't help but know, Lorgar doesn't. Not until he actually comes across chaos itself.
No,
he's not aware.
Yeah, you're right. And then Lorgar discovers the biggest part of the
deception.
Yeah, which
he does. He's the one that uncovers it.
That sequence was absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is something the Horus Heresy books do, which I love. Certainly the early ones, they take the archetypes of the legions that have been established in things like the Index Astartes articles, and then they subtly invert them. So you get like the word bearers, Yep. The word bearers are established in the background, in the Codex books, in the Index Astartes articles, as just these frothing fanatics. They are the equivalent of the Black Templars, but for chaos.
Yes.
That's what they are. They're the ecclesiarchy of chaos, And they're portrayed as these unthinking, fanatical, uncritical zealots who just slaughter anyone who doesn't agree with them,
I see no problems with this.
But when you come to the word bearers in the Horus Heresy books, certainly early on, that's not what they are.
No.
It's really quite surprising. It's not what they are at all. Lorgar is this very quiet, very clever, very considered philosopher. He's the weakest of the Primarchs physically. He is not a fighter. He's not, and he doesn't want to fight. That's the interesting thing. He's one of the only Primarchs who doesn't want to fight. He has earned the ire and scorn of most of his brothers. Most of them don't like him at all, because he doesn't want to fight. He wants enlightenment. He wants humanity to raise itself up. He does not want it to just be chinks in an empire. He doesn't just want it to be these. He doesn't want individual humanity to be suffering in the name of empire. He wants there to be unification. He wants there to be this grand ascendance in the same way that Magnus does. He's very like Magnus in many respects. It's just that his means of getting there are slightly different from Magnus's. Magnus is more like intellectual enlightenment, whereas Lorgar's is more metaphysical,
Yeah.
But it inverts what you would expect of these characters and turns them on their heads such that you start identifying with the ones that you originally hated.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's very clever. Now, before the Horus Heresy books, the word bearers, ideologically, I love them like in terms of their imagery and all that stuff, and I love the dark monasticism of them. But they would have been ideologically one of the forces in 40k that I would have hated, because they represent everything I despise, Yeah. But having read the Horus Heresy books, that's not the case anymore. That's just not the case anymore, because they are not as they are generally portrayed. They're very, very, very different. And also, within this universe, they're right.
They are. That's an important point to make. Everything that the word bearers do in their book, in that book anyway, It is for the betterment. It is a...
They believe it's true.
Yeah.
They believe that they are not happy about it. This is what I also love. If you read First Heretic Aurelian, which is the big one for me, Aurelian is the big one.
First Heretic.
First Heretic is awesome. But what you find is that the word bearers that go into the Eye of Terror and that encounter the true nature of chaos, that see the faces of the gods essentially, are not happy about it.
No.
They don't come out as these frothing fanatics like, we must spread the word. They don't come out like that at all. They come out as these battered, cynical, broken entities that are like, we've seen the truth and it's horrific.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the truth,
yeah.
And it's probably the only hope humanity has in this universe.
One of the things that happened in that book that really blew my mind was the sequence of events that led to the word bearers actually...
Monarchia.
Getting to the point where they understood how chaos works, how the Eye of Terror... Well, it wasn't the Eye of Terror at that point, was it? It was...
It was a nameless warp storm at that point. You know who calls it the Eye of Terror?
Who?
Perturabo.
All right.
Perturabo is the one who names it the Eye of Terror, and it's not. He doesn't declare it. It's an offhand reference. He's like looking up at it at one point, and he considers that it is like an Eye of Terror in the sky, and that's where it comes from.
That's awesome. I never knew that one.
It's an offhand reference. He doesn't even, it's not even declared. It's just this offhand little reference that somehow down the eons and ages swells to become the name of this warp storm.
Mm-hmm. That is
very cool, yeah?
Fantastic. I didn't know about that one at all.
Cool. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? And also, what the Word Bearers book does, it goes out of its way to establish sympathy for the Word Bearers. It begins, the First Heretic, with the Imperium and the Emperor and the Ultramarines, the icons of the Imperium, the good guys, as it were, being the most genocidal, oppressive bastards imaginable.
Well, they just come round to give a planet a spanking.
They do. But the way they do it, they destroy the city that he built. The great city, the greatest Monarchia, the way it's described, not just by the word bearers, but by lots of other characters as well. It's like Tizca on Prospero. Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
It is like the very apex of human civilization that Lorgar has built here. It's one of the greatest cities in all of the Imperium, in terms of its learning, in terms of its enlightenment, the status of the citizens, the general contentment and happiness. This is like the very image of the utopia that should be. And Lorgar built it on the back of his philosophy, yeah? And what happens? Because just this one little thing doesn't accord with the Imperium, with the Emperor's demands.
Yeah, with his will, with his image, his...
The whole thing is eradicated.
Yeah.
It's reduced to radioactive dust. It's amazing. And it's an amazing misstep as well. It's what we were discussing about before. This is another thing the Horus Heresy books do, which I really love. There's been, before the Horus Heresy books even came about, in the fan background, in like the forums and whatnot, there's always been discussion about how much the Emperor knew before the Horus Heresy, Yeah. Because it seems there are certain actions that he takes that are either monumentally stupid or they are consciously perverse, in the sense that he must know that they're going to push some of his sons towards chaos.
Yeah.
He must know.
Well, that's something that, in a continued evolution, when you look at Dark Imperium, how the Emperor views Reboot when he comes back.
Yep.
And you realise, that was the first time I firmly realised that the Emperor doesn't look at his sons as his biological offspring, something to be parental towards.
Oh, no.
They are tools.
They're tools, yeah. That's
tools
what they were made
to do
for.
a job, yeah.
That's what they were made for. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you suddenly start to realise that the way the background is presented, like the very broad overview of background you get in the Codex books, isn't the whole truth.
No.
It isn't the whole truth. Horus was a big surprise to me. Horus was a massive surprise to me. He's the first Primarch you meet face to face. And when you first meet him, like, Horus is this name that resonates throughout the mythology and history of the 40k universe. It's a name that evokes horror.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? He's the bane of everything. He's this laughing, smiling, joking, kind of witty, funny guy.
Yeah.
Who everybody loves. everybody loves him. He just immediately, everyone becomes effacing in front of him because he's so charming. He's so funny. He's so witty. He's joking all the time. He likes he likes people. He's a very human guy.
Yeah.
This is another thing that struck me about how much has changed since the Horus Heresy books hit. The Space Marines, the present-day Space Marines are very, 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 very different entities from the Space Marines that were around during the Great Crusade. Because, of course, since the Horus Heresy, the stringency that's placed on new recruits is tightened down to the nth degree.
Yes.
They can't allow even the merest flicker of weakness in. Because, of course, it could result in another Horus Heresy, yeah? Mm-hmm. So the Space Marines that exist now, in the present day, are subjected to all of this psycho conditioning. They are made into these perfect killing machines, essentially, these fanatical killing machines. Whereas the Space Marines at the Horus Heresy were not. They still have a lot of humanity in them. And they act in very human ways. They react in very human ways. They still have human passions and drives and fears and doubts. Mm-hmm. And that is really fascinating to see.
Well, it's before it all gets bred out of them, isn't it?
It is.
But
that wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing before Horus Rising hit.
No.
The Space Marines had always been the same, you know? Up until that point. The Horus Rising changed it completely. It made them more human, it made them more like characters in and of themselves, it gave them doubts and fears and confusions, and it works really, really well. Really well. And it adds this layer of tragedy to the 40k universe that these shining exemplars of humanity, genetically superior humanity, have degenerated over time and have become these emotionless killers, basically bred psychopaths.
What I found really interesting with the way that the Space Marines pre-Heresy stood is that they have more in common with the Rogue Trader and maybe not so much the second edition, but very much the Rogue Trader era
where
Space
they
Marines.
were still human beings, yeah?
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it's a very subtle nudge towards it.
I think so. There's lots of that in the Horus Heresy books, actually. There are loads of nods towards like pre-established background and to stuff that's not necessarily part of the background anymore. There's loads of it. Absolutely tons of it. And if you know the lore and the background, it's lots of fun. It's lots of fun.
Picking it all out.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go through and you can have a look at what's just the little throwaway references. But so much is different now. Like some of the changes are enormous, and people again don't seem to notice. The Emperor's Children background has been completely rewritten. Mm-hmm. Their dynamic in the Horus Heresy. Well, if you go back and read the Index Astartes article, in fact, if you go back further and you read the background originally established in Slaves to Darkness, the Emperor's Children are one of the loyalist legions that's assigned to quell Horus at Isstvan. So they are not one of the first ones to fall. They're actually alongside the Iron Warriors, the Night Lords, the Word Bearers, and various other legions that are sent to quell Horus at Isstvan, yeah? Mm-hmm. But it's in a parley with Horus that they become corrupted. That's completely gone now. That's completely gone, because they are one of the very first, in fact, I think they are the very first other legion that Horus corrupts. That's totally changed. Fulgrim and Mortarion and Angron are the three of the very first that are with Horus in the Horus Heresy books. So that background has actually not just been inverted or slightly rejigged. That's actually been totally changed. Totally changed.
Right.
Interesting, eh? Interesting. Also, one of the story elements that was originally Horus's, which is in the original background, Horus is definitely possessed by a demon. That's what leads him to stoke the heresy, yeah? Mm-hmm. It's during a parley with the tribes of Davin, yeah?
Right.
That is gone now. Or rather, it's not gone, it's been transplanted onto another legion. It's been transplanted onto Fulgrim. Fulgrim is the one that gets possessed by a demon now. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't last, of course, as we know.
No.
As we know. But But it's interesting how a lot of the background has been shifted and changed and has been rejigged slightly, just to make it flow more and to make it make more sense.
There's the Emperor and the War Master, I think, is a good thing to drop in at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, The Emperor and the War Master was originally written by Bill King around about 1990.
Mm-hmm.
It is a short story, 5 to 8 pages, something like that.
Yep.
And it's the Emperor and his Marines teleporting aboard Horus's flagship to go to Horus to kill him.
Yep.
The way that story works is he comes in, the Emperor comes in, his team is whittled down slowly but surely until he alone can stand in front of Horus, and Horus kicks the living hell out of him.
Yep.
So far, so much the same. However, the biggest difference in between that and everything that came afterwards was that Horus was demon-possessed at that point.
Yep.
And also unnamed guardsmen.
Yes, the unnamed guardsmen. They are, from what I can see, like my writer's craw is telling me that they're setting up a not the unknown guardsman itself, but a derivative of it.
Yes.
Something is going to happen redolent of that in the last book. Definitely.
I think so, and this is where I'm interested to see how that's going to fall into place.
Well, here's a thing I think is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Part of the original story that makes absolutely no sense is that Horus drops the shields around the Vengeful Spirit, his flagship. Yeah. It makes no bloody sense. It's the stupidest move imaginable, because that's what allows the Emperor to teleport aboard, yeah?
Well, I think that was the idea, isn't it? It's to bring the Emperor on board. He's... because I know that one of the thought processes is that he does it and then subtly has placed everything in place, so the Emperor has no choice but to teleport on board.
But to fight him, basically, yeah. But I think what is going to happen is little Horus Aximand, who is one of the new characters introduced. He's basically a space marine who looks like Horus, yeah? That's why they call him Little Horus.
And he's awesome.
I think he's going to have a change of heart, because that's been subtly suggested throughout the books that refer to the Sons of Horus. Horus Aximand is not comfortable with what's happening to the Legion, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And with the Heresy. I think he's going to be the unknown guardsman.
That would be awesome, actually.
I think that's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be symbolic of Horus killing his last vestige of himself.
Yes.
You know? That would be my guess.
That's a very, very cool idea, George. I like that.
That would be my guess, anyway. That's how I would write it if I were doing it, basically. But it is building up to this notion that there's going to be more complexity with regards to the confrontation between Horus and the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we see is only going to be the merest fraction of the actual conflict. I think there's going to be stuff where they're kind of debating with one another in like an astral plane, you know? Where they're fighting one another in spirit form and all of this stuff, yeah? That's what I think. There's also this wonderful ambiguity that's been set up in the Horus Heresy, because the Emperor has always been a mystery. It's never... In the original Lost in the Dam, you do find out where he comes from and what he is.
Mm-hmm.
But that has since been sort of shunted away, and it's not really part of the background anymore. The Horus Heresy books introduced the notion of, what are they called? Are they called Eternals, or...
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The Perpetuals.
That's the one, yeah.
The Perpetuals are really bloody interesting. They are this new element in the 40k universe that have only occurred in the Horus Heresy books, and they are immortal human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're human beings that can be killed, they can die, but they are reborn again.
Yeah.
Just eternally. They cannot actually be snuffed out. The Emperor is one. We know the Emperor is one. And there are others wandering around too. And they've been wandering around long enough that some of them know who the Emperor is. And they are acting across their own agendas, which span centuries and millennia. Some of them are older than the Emperor. Some of them have been around longer than him. And there's one in particular called John Grammaticus.
Yep.
Who knows the Emperor intimately. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's brilliant. He knows the Emperor intimately. And you never quite get what it is he knows about the Emperor, but you know that he hates him and he's horrified by him.
Yeah.
That's all you really know. Also, interestingly, one of the Primarchs is a perpetual. Vulcan.
Is he?
Yeah, Vulcan's a perpetual. Yeah, he can't die.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Vulcan is killed a lot in the Horus Heresy, mostly by Night Haunter.
Right.
There's a story where Night Haunter takes Vulcan, and it's for Night Haunter, it's like the pinnacle of his art. It's like, you can't die, so what can I do to you? And he basically subjects Vulcan to this sustained regime of torture and death until Vulcan is driven mad.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Vulcan's still alive. Vulcan's still around in the present-day Imperium. He's just a lunatic. Nobody quite knows where he is at this point. My guess is that he's the Primarch that Trazyn the Infinite has in his museum.
That would make a lot of sense, actually.
That's my guess.
Oh,
But again,
please say he's called the Babbling Primarch.
that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes,
he's
it
definitely
would.
got one of them. He's got one of them. We just don't know who it is.
Yeah.
In fact, there's another one that he's got as well, which we do know who it is. As a result of the Fabius Bile books, he's got a still mortal form of Fulgrim.
Right.
Yeah. It's too complex to go into.
Okay.
But he has in his museum a still mortal version of Fulgrim that hasn't fallen to Slaanesh. I mean, the potential ripples of that are insane, aren't they?
I need to get onto these Fabius Bile books.
Can you imagine if that version escapes and sides with the Imperium?
Yeah.
So you have loyalist Emperor's children.
What?
Yeah, right?
No, what?
It's great, isn't it? It'd be fantastic.
I'm struggling with this information, I'm going to be honest.
Right. I know. But that's kind of beside the point. There's so much that's different in the Horus, and so much that's unexpected, so much that's deliberately unexpected. Another thing that has never been a part of the background before the Horus Heresy books is the Unremembered Empire.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite additions. What happens in a nutshell is that the Word Bearers lay siege to Ultramar, and they, through various sorcerous means, they create this vast warp storm around it that seals it off from the rest of the Imperium. So several of the loyalist legions, which are ensconced on Ultramar, can't escape. So they're sealed away. And Robert Gilman, who is my favourite of the loyalist Primarchs, by the way, in these books, he is this incredible pragmatist. He doesn't like despair. He doesn't like, throw baby out with the bathwater and throw a temper tantrum, as many of the others would. What he does is, he's like, okay, so we're sealed off here in our own empire. If, as and when we find a way out, Horus is likely to have won. So the universe is likely going to be in flames. We are going to have to retake it. So what he does is consolidates. He creates, against the tenets of his father, by the way, because this is like anti-Imperium. He establishes his own Imperium within the Warp Storm and within Ultramar. And you get this empire of several Space Marine legions, the Dark Angels, the Blood Angels, and the Ultramarines. And it's like this little self-sustaining empire that eventually does escape, obviously, and goes to aid the siege. But it's sealed within this warp storm for a long time from its own perspective. They actually do establish this small Imperium.
Right.
Which is really cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know who he elects as regent of the Imperium, as the Emperor?
I don't.
Because he doesn't want it.
Right.
Sanguinius.
All right.
Yeah, Sanguinius is actually the Emperor of this small Imperium.
That's brilliant.
It's really cool, isn't it? But you know what else? What's really problematic? Someone else is sealed there with them. Night Haunter. Night Haunter becomes the bane of this new Imperium.
That's cool.
Isn't it cool?
That's
right?
very cool.
There's a sequence in Unremembered Empire. Night Haunter is fucking fantastic in the Horus Heresy books. He's one of the only ones who can go toe-to-toe with the likes of Angron and Lehman Russ and come out. he fights Vulcan, Robert Gilman, Lionel Johnson, and Sanguinius at one point, and he's winning.
Right.
He's a nightmare. Night Haunter is an absolute nightmare in these books.
Good grief! I need to get on to getting
There's a
caught
lot
up with
there.
these things.
There's a lot of sub-stories. I mean, some of them don't work. Some of them have only been introduced to sort of drag it out because it's a big name, because it sells a lot of books.
Yeah.
And those you can just ignore. You can just, like a lot of the Mechanicum stuff
Yeah.
isn't very good. It does, again, like the stuff that refers to the Space Marine Legions, it does set up some very interesting questions that has ripples and consequences for the present day Adeptus Mechanicus. Like, for example, it sets up the notion that there is an entity buried on Mars, which is likely a Catan.
Which is the Void Dragon.
The Void Dragon.
Oh, whoa.
And it's likely the inspiration for the Omnisia.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this kind of familial link between the Necrons and the Adeptus Mechanicus.
That would make so much sense.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it, though?
That would just click so many things into place.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. There's a lot of stuff like that. There's a hell of a lot of stuff like that.
Out of interest, George.
Yes, of course.
Because you've brought a thought to my brain. Is there any books that are based just on Mars?
Yes. The first one, which I believe is just called Mechanicum,
Right.
that is set on Mars.
I'm going to have to read that because I've always been interested to see what Mars is.
That's pretty cool, actually. Mechanicum is quite a good book. It's slower than the other Horus Heresy books because a lot of it isn't conflict. It's just build-up, But it's like it explores the political shifts between because Mars, of course, falls to Horus. It is actually loyal. It becomes loyal to Horus. It's the political shifts between the cults of the Mechanicum that are staying loyal to Earth and the Emperor, and those that are slowly turning towards Horus.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It's very, very interesting indeed. And it's also, as has been established, Mars and the Mechanicum societies are given license to be their own self-contained civilizations because of what they provide to the Imperium. They're one of the only offshoots that has license in that regard, because otherwise they would have definitely been eradicated. Were it not for what they provide technologically, they would have been eradicated, because they're one of the most deviant, ironically, to the point whereby they've almost totally sacrificed their humanity.
Yay!
But yeah, it's interesting. It's absolutely fascinating. You also get certain mysteries that have been established in the present day 40k universe, somewhat explained by the Horus Heresy books. So you find out kind of loosely where the Grey Knights come from.
Right.
Because there are these very small loyalist factions within the traitor legions. Like in the Death Guard, you've got Nathaniel Garrow and his lot. In the Emperor's Children, you have Saul Tarvitz. In the Sons of Horus, you have Loken and those guys. And they do manage these small factions to break away during the Siege of Istvan, and they make their way to the Imperium. And they become the forebears of the Grey Knights.
Right.
They scour away all of their Legion iconography and they wear grey.
Okay.
And they become this force, like a strike force, they're almost like the special ops or the black ops of the Imperium, and their business is to seek out and eradicate the sins of their former brothers. That's what they're for.
Right, and yeah, you can see the evolution of how they will
eventually become the Grey Knights. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. It's cool, isn't it? It's really quite cool. Yeah.
It's a nice natural starting point for them. Yeah,
and it's where you get the beginning of the Inquisition too.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very cool. And it's the guy who sort of masterminds this is it's like a collusion of Nathaniel Garrow from the Death Guard, Loken from the Sons of Horus, and Rogel Dawn.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Rogel Dawn is largely responsible for establishing this. Even a lot of the other loyalist Primarchs don't know that this special strike force exists, just in case they happen to turn at at some other point.
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite excellent, isn't it?
It is. It really is. There's so much more going on here than I've ever known about, which I knew was going to be the case.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, I have not read the majority of the Horus Heresy books. I've tried to go through as much as I can, but let's face it, there's a lot.
Not all of them are great. A lot of them are pretty damn bad. If you want a list of ones to avoid, Battle for the Abyss, do not go anywhere near. That's the worst. Battle for the Abyss is a toxically bad book.
What about
just awful?
What about Fear to Tread, the only 40k book ever turning up on Oprah Winfrey's recommendation list?
Fear to Tread I haven't read.
Okay.
That's one of the ones I have not read, so I'm not so sure about that one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff. There's this, there's a lot of like sub-stories that have never been part of the Horus Heresy background up until this point. So you've got the Unremembered Empire stuff. You've got the Nathaniel Garrow stuff. You've got the Calth stuff. So there are entire volumes that deal with the Battle for Calth, which is one of the big central worlds in Ultramar that the Wordbearers descend on.
And in the history, it's one of the big turning points as well.
It's one of the big points of the heresy, because it's on Calth that they establish the spell that sways Ultramar in the Warp Storm.
Yeah.
So it's very significant, and it's also what isolates the Ultramarines from reaching Earth during the heresy, because they turn up after the fact. Sadly, the Ultramarines turn up after everything's gone down. Alongside the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves.
Well, I'm not saying that the Ultramarines aren't the best thing in the world like they keep saying that they are, but, they're not the best thing in the world like they keep saying they are.
Well, to be fair to the Ultramarines, they never say that. It's other people that say that.
Yeah, that's true enough.
To be fair to the Ultramarines,
Don't be fair to the Ultramarines. They get enough of it.
I like them a lot more after reading about them in the Horus Heresy.
To be honest with you, I like them a lot more after reading Dark Imperium.
Yeah, I really do. Roboot is this great guy.
Oh, he's awesome.
A lot of, the loyalist Primarchs do not come off well in the Horus Heresy books.
No.
At all. They come off as hypocrites, as violent brutes, and it's actually the traitor ones who come off a lot better. A lot better. Roboot is one of the exceptions. Because he is a hard and fast pragmatist. He actually doesn't care about what his father says or proclaims if it's antithetical to the general well-being as he perceives it.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting things in the Horus Heresy books is that, the Council of Nicael?
Yes.
Which is one of the turning points in the Thousand Sons background.
Yeah.
Roboot doesn't abide by it.
Right.
Which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it very much is.
He actually maintains a Librarius on the off chance that they're required. Which, of course, they are. He was right.
That's... Even though he was correct, and even though he made the right decision, wouldn't that decision be one that should have classified him as a traitor?
A traitor, yes it would. And you know who else maintains a Librarius?
Would that be...
I bet you can guess.
Is it Fabulous Bill?
It's the Dark Angels.
Yes.
Of course the Dark Angels do. Because, again, Lionel Johnson isn't that bothered about what his father says. Another interesting thing. Lionel Johnson is on the fence for the longest time. He doesn't know whether to side with Horus or whether to side with the Emperor.
Oh, no, that's cool.
And so is Yagati Khan.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the fence for the longest time.
That makes a lot of sense because that ties into what the Dark Angels eventually became.
Exactly. And it's only,
like
to be honest, it maintains the ambiguity because he doesn't make the decision. He's forced by circumstance to side with the Imperium because he ends up ensconced in the Unremembered Empire.
Yeah.
He hasn't got a choice. So who knows what choice he might have made if it was left up to him? Who knows, eh?
Yeah, that is cool.
Who knows? Another interesting thing, it's one of the less well-regarded books, but you get more development about the schism in the Dark Angels, so where it comes from, why Luther turns ultimately. And again, you have a lot of sympathy for the guy. It's not that he's just jealous and that he's like feels abandoned or anything like that. There's a lot of politics going on Caliban, the Dark Angels' homeworld.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, this actually makes a lot of sense. I actually kind of get where Luther's coming from.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Fascinating stuff.
It is.
The amount of stuff that's established that was never established before. Like, for example, Angron and the World Eater's homeworld. We didn't know what that was. It never had a name. We never even knew anything about it up until now.
No, we didn't. It was...
In Betrayer, we find out what it is. Nuceria. It's a world that's not a million miles away from Ultramar, actually. And it's a shithole. It's a world that...
Must not make Wolverhampton joke.
No, well, I'm heading there later today, so... but it's...
Of course you are,
you know, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's absolutely fascinating that you're getting this development. Angron himself becomes a totally different character in the Horus Heresy books. A totally different character. Is he this frothing mad berserker? Yes. Yes, he is. But you learn why. And you also get to see more of him. Like what he is or could have been.
Okay.
Like, he's with Lorgar a lot. Like, his total antithesis amongst the traitor Primarchs, you know? And they debate and they chat and they talk and they get on. That Lorgar and Angron get on pretty damn well. Angron's got a lot of time for Lorgar. It's really interesting. It's really bizarre. They debate. You've got Lorgar, one of the most learned, erudite, eloquent of the Primarchs, debating philosophy with Angron.
I can't get my head around that one.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It really is wonderful. And that's true of a lot of characters. Khan the Betrayer. You would have thought that he would be the most frothing mad of the Berserkers even when they were loyalists, wouldn't you?
You would have thought.
No. He's actually the calmest of them. He's the only one who can talk to Angron.
Right.
He's the one whose job it is to act as an intermediary between Angron and the rest of the Legion. Because he's the only one who can calm him down. He's the most measured, the most considered of the World Eaters.
That's brilliant.
It's so cool, isn't it? It's so cool. Khan is actually a great character in the Horus Heresy books. He's really likeable. He's really likeable.
Well, I suppose that's the thing, is it? The what do you lose?
Yeah.
Yeah, what it gets sacrificed.
Exactly. Yeah, it just makes it all the more tragic, you know? Makes it all the more tragic. The same is true of Ahriman. Arzek.
Oh, yeah.
You'd expect him to be a sort of mustachio-twirling, sort of finger-wringing villain, wouldn't you? You know? You'd expect him to be duplicitous and lying and conniving, and he's just not.
No.
He's actually this very innocent guy. He's one of the most human of the Space Marine characters in the Horus Heresy. He's got a lot of sympathy and time for humanity, as the Thousand Sons generally do. And he is a victim. He's very, 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 very much a victim. The only like established character who's pretty much the same as he always was is Fabius Bile. He starts out as he ends, basically. He's pretty much the same, barring the lack of the spidery engine on his back and the coat made of flayed faces. He's pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's... As I say, when it comes to Ahriman, it's someone we've discussed many, many times in the past.
Yeah, well, he's my favourite character in 40K.
Oh, yeah, he's brilliant because he is a genuinely sympathetic character. Yeah. You feel for him and everything he's tried to do every time it's gone wrong. Totally.
I mean, he's kind of the underdog in the sense that he is continually smacked down, but keeps getting up.
Yeah.
After, like, the most monumental failures that result in genocides, the desolations of entire legions, he keeps getting up and going back and trying again.
Yeah.
And it's like, you've got to have some respect for him.
Definitely.
You know, He's a really cool character. I love Ahriman. I really, really like Ahriman.
I've said it multiple times now that when this 40k animated series hits, I want Ahriman to be the bad guy in it. I want Ahriman to be in it, just so you can see every single time he's brought down to his knees, the strength of will that he needs to get back up again and keep going.
Oh god, it's insane. If you read the John French books, or the Ahriman books, that really delve deep into what's going on in his mind, he is amazing. He's so complex.
Yeah.
As you'd expect from a puppet of Zeech,
Oh, that's true enough, yeah.
His mind is like a labyrinth, but it's like an ever-shifting labyrinth, There are aspects of himself that contradict and conflict with himself. And it's hard for him to tell which ones are in the ascendant. It's really phenomenally cool. He is one of the most complex characters in 40k, I would say.
Yeah. I'm aware that time's getting on a little bit here.
Yes.
I think this is a subject that we can return to in the future.
There's still so much to talk about. I mean, we could look more at how the Imperium and the status of the 40k universe has changed itself,
Definitely.
The empire of the Imperium, as we've said, has dynamically gone from being a utopian vision to being a dystopian one. So it went from being a forward-thinking empire that was always looking towards tomorrow, that was attempting to establish something, to being something that is perpetually under siege, that is crumbling from within, that is attacked from without, and that is only seeking to survive. It's no longer seeking to better itself.
Yeah.
It's no longer seeking to evolve. It is seeking to sustain, to just hold on.
I was going to say, what it is it's putting all of its effort into hanging on by its fingertips in order to not fall into the abyss.
Absolutely. The status of humanity does not matter anymore.
No.
It just does not matter.
As long as humanity is.
Exactly, as long as humanity is. And as for individual worth...
it's out the window.
Absolutely meaningless. I mean, what would you call the state of the Imperium? It's a carcass. It's not an oligarchy. It is a tyranny and a despotism after a sense. It is a theocracy after a sense, but it's so much more than that. It's like all the very worst states a civilization can be, all thrown together.
It's weird. It's worse than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it really is.
Oh yeah, it's a held
moribund,
together.
Isn't it?
Oh, very much so.
It's moribund. Like, the fundamental question that faces the Imperium, it seems to me, is, right, so you've got this preconception that humanity has to survive, yeah? Why?
There is the good question. And the answer is some kind of arrogance, the idea that there is a divine right for humanity to be the master race within the stars.
It's ironically the only thing that's actually sustained since the Great Crusade days, but it's become, even from that original preconception, which was Nazist enough, this version of it is even worse.
Well, yeah, it's what happens when the Stalin Sovietism falls apart and then gets rebuilt into Spanish Catholicism. It's the entirety of the Imperium is just being held together by spit glue and some kind of divine arrogance.
That's pretty much it. And, you could argue that it's not even being held together. You could argue that what you've got in the Imperium, especially in the present day where a lot of it is cut off, is just these very loosely organized sub-empires that are increasingly factionalized.
Yes, and I think as time goes on, we're going to see them factionate more and more and more.
I think so too. I think that's where they're heading, especially having read the first Vigilus book. I do think that's where they're going. I think we're going to get we've already got Imperium Secundus and Imperium Nihilus, don't we?
Yeah, Nihilus and Secundus.
It's already happened. It's already schismed into two.
Oh, I look forward to Imperium Tritarius.
Oh my god. Well, I think you're going to see the status shifting when we see the returns of more Primarchs.
Yes.
I think that's when it's going to happen. Lehman Russ, when he comes back, it's going to be interesting.
But you know what Tritarius would be, don't you?
What's that?
Triterius would be all the other Marine chapters you've forgotten ever existed.
Yeah. So like the Raven Guard, for example,
Yeah.
and whatnot. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, there was even rumors floating around that Ferrus Manus was considered to be coming back. I just don't. Actually,
Really?
I do know how they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
He could be a cyborg.
Okay.
He could be like a robot. You know? Like maybe an artificial intelligence.
Well, there seems to be something about the artificial intelligences rising again, isn't there? That seems
It's
to be happening.
fascinating, isn't it? Eh? Fascinating stuff.
There is one question I do want to ask you before we start closing up, though. And it's something that I was going to ask you earlier on, but the conversation just kept rolling, so I never got the chance. Yeah. There is one thing in the Horus Heresy, a concept that got dropped into my lap that to this day still freaks me the hell out.
Yeah.
And that's the butcher's nails.
Oh, the butcher's nails, yeah. In fact, that's another bloody good point. The butcher's nails only came about in the Horus Heresy.
They did. They didn't exist beforehand.
There was a vague reference to psychosurgery.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all you got. It was like a one-sentence thing, and that's it.
They are just... Oh, I don't even know how to begin describing it.
They are like the very worst inventions humanity has ever come up with. Yeah? They are like...
Yes, without a doubt.
They are evidence that humanity actually deserves to be wiped out in this universe. Mm-hmm. Because they are these torture engines designed to create psychopaths.
Yes.
They are the worst things ever.
I can't remember which story it's in, but there's a part where they talk about how the butcher's nails are just there buzzing in the back of the head, constantly pushing, constantly probing, constantly poking. And it's just,
it's the worst
horrible
thing, isn't it?
Well, it's imbuing psychosis.
Yeah, absolutely. In Betrayer, you get a lot of detail about how the butcher's nails work.
Yeah.
And you also get the notion that the ones that are implanted in Angron are different. They're necessarily different because he's a Primarch.
Yeah.
And they weren't designed to work with a Primarch's physiology. So they're actually killing him. Mm-hmm. They're not only driving him mad, they're actually killing him. Which is one of the reasons why Lorgar engineers his ascension to the state of the Prince of Blood. Because it saves him.
Yeah.
Okay, it sustains him in this state of perpetual, like, frothing madness, but he's alive.
But he's alive. He's okay, you know, physically.
He's a lot happier as the Demon Prince of Blood than he ever was as a mortal. So, you know, he's actually a lot happier.
That's true enough, yeah.
But yeah, the Butcher's Nails are one of the nastiest inventions in all of 40k, I would say.
I would agree with that.
And, you know, 40k is a nasty place.
Well, there's a reason it's called the Grimdark, you know.
Yeah, there are lots of horrible inventions, but I would say the Butcher's Nails are the very fucking worst things imaginable. Mm-hmm. And they are the kinds of... You know, the worst of them is I can see a potential reality coming from them.
Mm-hmm.
I can see, like, military structures in the future creating things like that.
Because it creates uncontrollable soldiers that you can then control.
Well, it creates perfect soldiers who are fearless, you know, who have no moral quandaries, who just go in and do what they're supposed to do, you know?
Yeah. The berserkers that you can switch on and off.
Exactly. I can see it. I can see that becoming... very real. Well, in a metaphorical sense, I mean, this is getting very close to the now, but in a metaphorical sense, that's what happens anyway in militaries. It's just that it doesn't happen through surgery, it happens through conditioning.
Yes,
you know?
yeah.
You create, you know, loyal, controllable psychopaths through military structures. That's what it's about. So it's not that much different. I mean, the Butcher's Nails in that regard are a kind of metaphor.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
They're a kind of metaphor. But I can see there being an actual reality like that not terribly far down the line.
I think the best thing to do with that thought is we'll just shelve that one for now because I don't really try to think about what's going to happen over the next couple of years.
Oh, hello? Oh, no! Has it crapped out?
I'm so scared of what's going to happen over the next couple of years. Oh. You still
hello
there,
again.
Oh,
it crapped out at the last minute there. Just when you said, something about on that point.
Basically, I was just saying something along the lines of, I think the best thing to do with that point is to put that onto the shelf, because the last thing I want to do is think about what's going to happen over the next couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Because
absolutely.
the next couple of years scares the living hell out of me.
Well, yeah, it does. It does me too. I've even conceived of potential, like, just like gathering all my friends together and going and finding an abandoned farm somewhere and just like living in a commune for the rest of our lives, you know? Or at least until everything blows over, away from the structures of existence. That's what I've conceived of, you know? Because it may come to that, you know? It may conceivably come to this point where we do have to band together and we do have to start, like, living communally again.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, there would be no real harm in that.
No, there wouldn't.
However, we would probably lose a lot of internet time and a vast amount of Games Workshop hobby time.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
On the plus side, though, we would all learn how to farm potatoes.
I'm okay with farming. You don't really farm potatoes. You shove them in the soil and they grow.
See, this is how little I know about farming potatoes.
Potatoes can grow anywhere.
That's true.
Have you never put? Are you still listening to this, ladies and gents? By the way? But have you ever put potatoes in a dark cupboard?
Yes.
And left them?
Yes, and
they grow.
They get the little tubers out and they start searching for souls.
Yeah, they grow, and sometimes they can grow really quite far without soil. You know.
Yeah.
Without light, without anything.
Potatoes. The Horus Heresy of fruit.
Yeah,
vegetables.
I mean,
vegetables, Adam.
Vegetables, Adam. Yeah.
Oh
dear.
Dear.
To be specific.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Okay. All right. I think with that, George, I think we're done for the day.
I think you should call this episode "Are Potatoes Fruit?"
I'll tell you what. The next proper episode we do, we'll call it Our Potatoes Fruit. And we'll see if anybody calls back to why it's called that episode.
Yeah, that'd be great. Nothing to do with the episode, obviously.
No,
nothing to do with the episode whatsoever.
But we'll see how many people are listening to the Patreon episodes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love it. Absolutely love it.
So, with all that being said, I think, before we finish up, there's one thing I do want to say to the world out there. Mm-hmm. Do you have something you want us to talk about as a sanctioned episode?
Yeah, let us know, please. We're up for it, you know?
Oh, yeah. We've got these back into the sway that we need to be. We're going to be getting them out.
There is one thing I would like to talk about, actually, because I've noticed and this is because of the nature of the hobby at the moment, we do tend to focus more on the Imperium Chaos side of things, yeah? I'd love to talk about, like, the Eldiri Empires and and all that stuff. Love to talk about that.
I know there's a load of character studies I'd like to do on people who informed the 40k universe at its inception. Stuff like Herbert in the Dune series.
Oh yeah, Michael Moorcock.
Yeah,
Did we do Lovecraft?
We've done Lovecraft. Yeah. We still need to do what's his name, Conan writer.
Robert E. Howard.
Yes,
yeah.
Howard. So there's plenty there.
That'll be an interesting one.
Oh yes.
If we're going to look at the man himself, it'd be very interesting.
The man, the myth, the madness.
The money boy. yeah.
The interesting dates he went on.
Oh my god, yeah.
Have you seen the film that was about him?
What, like a biopic?
Yeah, but it's done from the point of view of the long-term girlfriend he had.
No.
It's a very interesting film.
I imagine it is, because he was like Lovecraft, damaged but interesting.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. And there's some really... The guy I can't remember the name of the actor who plays him, but he only ever really comes to life when he's talking about Conan.
Yeah, right, okay.
So
that's really interesting.
It's a really good film. But anyhow, that's for another conversation.
Tis.
Thank you so much for that, George. I have absolutely enjoyed listening. I know I haven't said very much, but I have enjoyed every second of that.
No, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed that.
And thank you to you guys at home for listening.
Yes, thank you so much, guys.
Your money makes me happy.
Aha!
Give me more. Or just keep giving me the same amount. Either way, thank you. And good night.
Bye-bye.